to another tenement tabletop Napoleonic battle. And today is something a little bit different. Again, trying to do something a bit different every time. And this one is based around l'espionage. The scenario is two British spies dressed as French Dragoons have infiltrated the French ranks. They've gained vital information about troop type, troop position, and then they've got out of there with that key information, and they are fleeing a huge French army which is in pursuit of them to make sure that information doesn't fall into the British hands. They have managed to get back to this crossroads almost, they're nearly there, which is being held by the 33rd Regiment of Foot, the Yorkshire Regiment, one close to my heart. So they have barricaded this crossroads and are occupying these small farmhouses. And the two British spies, the Dragoons, are going to scurry back in to this fortified farmhouse. And they are going to try and hold that position while the rest of the British army turns up. So we've got the Yorkshire Regiment in the farmhouse, and we've got the 1st Royal Scots coming down this road, and they're going to be the first ones to arrive to help. And then it's going to be up to some good rolling on behalf of the British commander, which will be George, as usual. He's got 2 brigades that are going to start off the table, and they're going to come on either side of this road in these fields. So the British brigades consist of 1 cannon battery, 2 regiments of Highlanders, and a unit of 95th Rifles with their brigade commander. Oh no, sorry, that's Wellington. Their brigade commander starts on the table. And then over on the right, they've got 1 unit of Highlanders, a unit of heavy cavalry, and 1 unit of 95th Rifles. So the French have got 2 brigades. The one on their right flank is a mixed brigade, so it's 3 units of infantry, one of them being Old Guard, 1 unit of light cavalry, 1 battery, and 1 unit of skirmishers. And over on their left flank, they have 5 units of infantry, 1 being Old Guard at the rear, and 1 unit of skirmishers out in front. So as usual, it'll be 6 turns. We're not going to do points for holding any ground. Every time we do that, the British always hang on to it, and it always kind of decides the game. So this is just going to be a straight up destroy as many units as you can. The French objective, to destroy as many British units and take the spies hostage. And the British objective is to hold their ground and reinforce that position so that the French can't do that. So that's it, quite a simple one. Okay, so that's the end of British turn 1. George's left flank is a little bit empty. So the existing brigade commander on the table, he failed his order. So he couldn't move this unit of Royal Scots, and he couldn't bring on any of the rest of that brigade on the left. But over on the right, the 2nd Brigade did arrive. So that's Gordon Highlanders, 95th Rifles, Wellington came along with them, and some heavy cavalry. Actually, I just realised we forgot to put the brigade commander on for them. We'll add him on. So that's the end of British turn 1. So we'll now move into French turn 1. Okay, so the French finished moving. 2 reasonably successful brigade orders. The left flank moved up 1 move, and the right flank moved up 2 moves, but had to hop the fence, so took a 6-inch penalty. So everything's moved up pretty well, and we've got a very small amount of shooting with just these front skirmishers in range of the farmhouse compound. So we'll go into some French shooting now. Okay, to summarise, good movement from the French, and these voltigeurs putting some fire into the compound, inflicting 1 casualty and disorder on the Yorkshires, which is pretty good considering that they only get 2 dice. So that's the end of the French turn, and we'll now move into British turn 2. Okay, so we were at quite an interesting moment, so I thought we'd get it on video. So the right-hand British flank of Highlanders and 95th have moved up into a firing position successfully. And the last people to move were going to be the household heavy cavalry unit. However, they used their reroll from Wellington and have rolled a blunder. So George is going to roll on the blunder chart. So here we go. 1d6.
Oh no.
Reroll. That's a 6. I think that's quite good, but we'll check it.
I need a 6 again.
So this is on the blunder chart. George has rolled charge. A 2 is going to be 1 move, so they're going to move up 18 inches, which is effectively what he wanted to do in the first place.
Phew.
So that's worked out quite well. Could have been a disaster. So I think that's the last British unit that can move. So we'll now go into some British shooting. Okay, so that's the end of the British second turn. Quite a lot happened actually. So 95th and Highlanders have moved up to plug this gap, and they've put some fire into the voltigeurs with and into the line infantry, but no casualties or disorder. The cavalry blundered into the perfect position that George wanted to move into anyway. The Yorkshires have put some fire into the artillery over on that side unsuccessfully. The Royal Scots still coming up this road. I don't think George is in any immediate rush to move them. And then over on the left, this brigade are waiting their turn patiently to get stuck in, which will probably be next turn. So we'll move into French turn 2. Okay, that's the end of French turn 2, and I mean, going on my previous record, that was a very successful turn. So over here, the 4 units of line infantry put fire into the Highlanders. No casualties, but disorder, so they're going to be held up there. The skirmishers in the trees fired into the compound and put disorder onto the Yorkshires again. Again, no casualties though. Over here, the line infantry fired into the compound, no casualties. And amazingly, the cannons, which successfully moved and unlimbered, which never happens, fired all the way over into the Highlanders. I think it's the Black Watch here. No casualties. Oh no, one casualty and disorder. So yeah, that's amazing. Like, cannons in our games recently have not really been very useful. So that's probably more than they've done in the last 3 games combined, which is lovely to see. So, very successful turn for the French, I think. The British are going to have a little bit of a hold up on either flank, but they've still got plenty of units to move about. So we will move into British turn 3. So British turn 3, that's their movement done. Quite a lot of good stuff for George actually. So the household cavalry, they have charged that line infantry unit in the middle, and they failed to form a square. So there's going to be a massive hand-to-hand combat here. The French have got lots of support, but these heavy cavalry guys are absolutely brutal in combat. So we'll see what happens there. The disordered Highlanders obviously haven't moved. And then over on the left flank, the Camerons moved up to this hedge line. And then the Royal Scots from the road originally, they've moved over and formed line behind them. So they're plugging this left flank. And then up in the trees, right up in the face of the French, is the 95th. And they're going to have probably some close range fire into these guys. And then right at the back, the Black Watch obviously didn't move because they're disordered. And then the cannons have unlimbered. So hopefully we'll have our second round of successful cannon fire, which will be a nice change. So we're moving to some British shooting. So that is the end of British turn 3 shooting. And that was a very successful turn for George. So 95th into line, disordered. Yorkshire's in the compound into line, disordered. Cameron Highlanders into line, disordered. 95th Rifles into line, disordered. And 2, 4, 5, 6 casualties in all. So light infantry took 2, artillery took 1, line took 2, line took 1, line took none. So lots of casualties, lots of disorder. The French have gone from looking or being very confident to probably thinking things are a little bit ropey now. So that's the end of their shooting, and there's just this absolute mash of hand-to-hand to do next. Okay, so that hand-to-hand went quite well for both sides, really. The Lifeguards charged in, inflicted 3 casualties on this line unit, so they've been shaken. They had support to both flanks and the rear, thankfully, so that's helped them. The Lifeguards had support from the rear by the Gordons, and they get the D3 added to their points. So it was 6-4 to the Lifeguards, which is an absolute ton of points when you look at most hand-to-hands. So the French lost that one, but they passed the break test with a double 6. So that's going to move into the next turn. That big hand-to-hand will continue. So we will move into French turn 3. Lots of disorder, so probably not going to be a huge amount, but we'll see. So that's the end of French movement turn 3. Starting over on this side, these skirmishers have just moved just in front of the line unit who are disordered, so they can put in basically point blank fire into the 95th in the woods. The cannons in the middle have just pivoted slightly so they can fire into the compound. The old guard moved through this disordered unit again so they can put close range fire into the compound. These skirmishers who were previously in the trees have just moved forward so they can put close range fire into the compound as well. And then that huge block of infantry is kind of a bit bogged down. You've got 2 units that are disordered, 1 that's in combat, so they've not really got anywhere to go just yet. And then, sorry, missed it over on this side. The Lancers charged the Camerons. They did survive closing fire, but they took 1 casualty and disorder. So not ideal, but still plenty of movement, turning into an absolute bloodbath in the middle now. So we'll go into some French shooting next, of which there's probably quite a lot. Okay, so round 2 of the Lifeguards hammering into the French line infantry. They inflicted 3 casualties on the French unit who was already shaken. So that's them up to 6. And the Lifeguards received 2 casualties, so that's them up to 3. So they're both shaken. The French are now in excess. The British have won that combat. It was 7-5, all points in. So huge scoring. The French are going to be break testing, and they're going to be on -3. So this needs to be really high. That's a 10. So that's down to a 7. I think they're going to hold the ground. I will check the table and yeah, I think they'll hold their ground, but that'll go into the next turn. Both units are now shaken though, so even if next time is a draw, they'll both break test. Right, so the line lancers took casualties and were disordered on close and fire, so they've not performed very well. And they just rolled a 3 on their break test. So they are going to be off the board. That's them gone. The Camerons will be very, very pleased with that. So there'll be a big gap right here any minute now. I think that's the end of French turn 3, so we'll go into British turn 4. Okay, so British turn 4. The only thing that really moved is the Gordons have just like moved into this little pocket so they can actually see some of the line units charging them. And then over on this side, nothing really happened, and the Black Watch failed their order. George was trying to move them round to the right flank, but didn't go so well. So they're all going to stay where they are pretty much. And we'll move into some shooting. Okay, that is big. Big news over on the British right flank. The Lifeguards failed to inflict any casualties on the French, despite them being shaken. And they did take some casualties themselves, and they rolled a 4 on their break test, which went down to a 3 due to excess casualties. So they broke, and unfortunately the Gordons, who were supporting them to the rear, also failed their break test with a 4. So we've got a large gap where those 2 units used to be. So George has got a bit of work to do to get either some cannons or some Black Watch round to his right flank to help out this compound who is coming under huge amounts of fire from the French. So it's getting a bit exciting over on that right flank. British are doing well over on the left though. Obviously they saw off the lancers. So there's no more cavalry left on the board, which is very unusual. Usually our cavalry charging, people form square and then they just sit there. But we've used the form square rule where you have to pass a command order or a command roll rather than the 6-6 thing. So that's proved a lot more exciting, and I think we'll do that in future more often. So we'll go into French turn 4. Okay, so that's us at the end of French turn 4 shooting. So the French have moved up into this big gap on the right British flank. One of the line units has stayed back to try and deal with the 95th in the woods, while the rest, including the Old Guard, have moved up to put fire into this compound again, which has taken so many hits basically. But they're still holding out. Over on this side, Old Guard are fired into the compound. Cannons, which were disordered into the compound, did terribly. The skirmishers over here having a little battle, 95th versus Voltigeurs. This unit are now shaken in the woods. And then this light infantry attack column did charge the Camerons and was shaken by closing fire, but did pass the break test. So they're probably not going to do very well in combat, but we shall see. So there's only this hand-to-hand to do. We'll go into that now. The only thing that happened in that hand-to-hand was the light infantry were obliterated. They had 6 casualties, failed their break test, and they have ran off, basically. And who can blame them, really? Thankfully, the Old Guard over here were just within 6 inches, so they were supporting to the rear, and they did pass their break test. So only the one unit has left the board. Grand, so we'll go into British turn 5. Okay, so that is the end of British turn 5. There's no hand-to-hand, so I'll just do a quick summary of their movement and shooting. The Black Watch, they tried to swing round to the right flank, but didn't get enough orders, so they've been held up in the middle of the battlefield here. The Cannons tried to do something similar. They limbered and then didn't go any further, so they hopefully will be able to move this turn. go and reinforce George's right flank. And then over on the left, neither of these two units moved, and the unit in the unit of Yorkshires in the farm compound, they're holding their ground pretty well. To be honest, they've been taking some amount of fire, and there's no hand to hand. So the only thing left to do is summarise the French side. So cannons disordered again and shaken. They passed their break test, thankfully. Old Guard on their right flank are shaken, and the Old Guard on the other side are disordered. That was by the 95th over in the trees. So we'll go into French turn 5. Okay, just to summarise, French turn 5. So we're nearing the end of the battle. After this go, we're both on our last turn. The line infantry have just nudged up a little bit to put more fire into the 95th in the woods. This allowed 2 units of line infantry to swing round and charge the flank of the compound. So we're going to get into a lot of hand-to-hand this time. Unfortunately, the Old Guard, who are basically under this huge pile of cotton wool, failed to get rid of the disorder, so they're stuck there. So they are going to be supporting this unit, which charged the front of the compound. We haven't done any closing fire yet, we'll do that now. Over on this side, the line unit of French infantry have moved through the Old Guard to put fire into the compound, all the Camerons, sorry. And then the brigade commander has rallied the Old Guard back down to 3. We've got shaken and disordered cannons, so they're not going to do much probably. And then the skirmishers are still just firing at each other from point blank range over here. So we will move into French shooting. There's probably not a huge amount to do because the compound has been charged from both sides, so obviously we can no longer fire into that. Okay, so the hand-to-hand combat at the compound, this one was a draw, so it continued. But this one with the line infantry over here, the British have taken 2 casualties and have lost the combat, so the Yorkshires in the compound who've held out so well are going to be on a -2 break test. Here we go. It's a 9, so that'll be down to a 7. I think they'll be fine. They'll hold their ground and they'll be back down to 3. Okay, that is the end of British movement and shooting for turn 6. The Black Watch actually managed to charge into the flank of this line unit over here, so that's going to be a complete mess. Nothing over here moved, and the cannons, George is leaving them well out of the way, just in case they get shot at, basically. So we will move into some hand-to-hand at the compound. We've got 3 areas of hand-to-hand to work out. We just need to figure out the rules about how the hell these guys fight on a flank. Back in a minute. Okay, just to summarise, that's the last turn for the British. Just one more turn for the French to go, and George's massive swing round to the right with the Black Watch Highlanders has really paid off. He destroyed one of the French line infantry units, and then the supporting unit also failed the break test, so they fell back. So he's bought himself some very valuable time and space over there. Again, the Yorkshires in the compound, they've held out again, passed another break test because they drew the hand-to-hand with this unit. And yeah, they were shaken at the start of the turn, but they've passed, so they're going to hold out again. We'll now move into the final turn of the game, but it's very close. It's all very close. Okay, so that is the end of the game. That's their last French turn 6, and lots happened. The Yorkshires were driven out of the compound by this unit of line, and they were destroyed, which means the spies were captured. Very crucial point. And then over here, the Old Guard survived closing fire despite all the disorder, won the combat, and the Black Watch because they just only were just shaken, they didn't need to break test. So that would have continued into the next turn if there was one. Over in the woods, the 95th survived unbelievable amount of fire from the line infantry over there. Right, so we've just counted up the points. The British destroyed 3 units French, so that's 6 points. They shook the cannons over here, and they shook the line infantry that eventually moved in to take the compound. So that gives the British 8 points. The French destroyed 4 units on the board, so that's 8 points. The Black Watch are shaken, and then this was hiding in the woods over here. The 95th are also shaken. So that gives the French 10 points. So finally, the French won a game. Brilliant. So next time we're going to change period. Go out on a high. Very good. That was a very enjoyable game. Not just because I won. For a change. That's the first time that George has lost a game, which is quite impressive. Grand. We'll do something a bit different next time. Hopefully some Anglos who are working on some new units as we speak. Cheers.